Kirstjen Nielsen prepares to give a major speech on the state of
Two of Fox and Friends. Ainsley's off and Jed's in.
Happy 7 a.m., everyone.
Yeah, we have a lot to discuss today. The 2020 field keeps getting bigger, and the President of the United States was doing a lot of tweeting over the weekend, so he certainly created a little bit of controversy there.
Yeah, what's up with GM? He wants to know why they closed that plant.
Right, so he made a call to the CEO. That's what's good about being president. They pick up when you call. Meanwhile, let's go to this. Kirstjen Nielsen is set to give a major speech on the state of Homeland Security right now, especially the border. Today, she will likely push for border security. Wouldn't that be nice?
This comes as freshman Democrat Rashida Tlaib calls the border wall racist.
Griff Jenkins is live in Washington, D.C. with the very latest. Griff?
Hey, good morning, guys. Yeah, big speech tonight. Secretary Nielsen will lay out her vision for a more secure homeland tonight at George Washington University, expanding on recent testimony that we have an unsustainable humanitarian and security crisis on the border, as Congress is still trying to override the president's veto after the vote to block his declaration. And in case you were wondering, President Trump hasn't forgotten the defecting dozen. He tweeted this yesterday. Those Republican senators who voted in favor of strong border security and the wall are being uniformly praised as they return to their states. They know there is a national emergency at the southern border, and they had the courage to act. Great job. Meanwhile, some Democrats, as you mentioned, are tying the president to the massacre in New Zealand and labeling supporters of the border wall as racist. Congressman Rashida Tlaib saying this.
Every time we talk about a wall, it's not about a structure, but about xenophobia. It's about racism. It is a symbol in so many ways of targeting brown and black people in our country.
Acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney says such claims are absurd, and he also expects the president's veto will be upheld when Congress returns at the end of the month. Guys?
All right, Griff, we thank you very much for that.
Thanks so much.
Meanwhile, when you talk about illegal immigration and the cost, Betsy McCoy, the former lieutenant governor of the great state of New York, was with us just about an hour ago. She wrote an eye-opening op-ed over the weekend in the New York Post called, "Actually, We Can't Afford Not to Build the Wall." And here she is, just about an hour ago, breaking down some of the hidden costs of illegal immigration. Listen.
The fact is that if you add up the costs, we've got $3 billion a year spent last year housing families and single adults, plus about $2.5 billion housing the unaccompanied teens. When you look at what taxpayers are being forced to spend to house these fake asylum seekers, it's staggering. And the president, believe it or not, actually cares about taxpayers.
Yeah, since it was an all-time high at 1.6 million back in 2000, where everything's been declining a little bit until this year. We're on target now to get over 1 million people crossing the border. 76,000 came across last month at just alone, and it's supposed to go up again this month with the weather getting nicer. So the question is this, is that just because some of them are families, it doesn't mean we don't need extra security because they turn themselves in, because then you have to round them up and then you got to house them. It's going to cost additional money. Others are up to no good. They are criminals. That's where you need the border. You better ferry them to the ports of entry. There's just no scenario where putting up a barrier doesn't help. But if you were able to change the Flores rule, the back from the 1990s, that makes people be released after 20 days, kids anyway, after 20 days, the magnet would begin to be turned off. And it's just amazing to me that Democrats and Republicans, a year out from the election, can't say, okay, you know, we do have a problem. Let's not either side benefit from it. Let's just try to solve it.
I like that you say Democrats and Republicans, because this responsibility falls on both. I just don't understand how you see a number like illegal crossing 76,000 in February. You don't realize, yes, this is absolutely a crisis. This is not manufactured. And I do think it's key. We have been talking about it as a humanitarian crisis and human trafficking and drug trafficking. But the cost does matter, too. This is a cost to American taxpayers who are footing this bill. So I think it's important for the president to drive that home as well. And for both Democrats and Republicans to be held accountable that you guys have been in positions of power for a really long time. No one's done anything about this. This is an emergency. There is urgency to it, and the time to act is now.
It's a bipartisan problem. Republicans have had the opportunity to change it. Democrats have had the opportunity. They did not. Ben McCoy referred to it as phony asylum seekers. I mean, there are some people who do seek asylum, and they are granted it.
That's right.
But she was talking about how a majority of them are not. When you look at just because you've got a family member in the United States or you want to make money, those are not bona fide reasons.
Right, a distinction between legitimate people who are deserving of asylum and those claiming asylum who don't warrant asylum.
Exactly, but one of a staggering number in her op-ed, and I didn't realize this, it costs the United States, over $3 billion, the cost of sheltering illegal border crossers. Uncle Sam spends a staggering $775 per day for each teenager housed at a shelter in Florida's Homestead Air Reserve Base. $775 per teenager per day.
Right, and you say Uncle Sam, that's the American people's money. There is no government money that exists in some utopia. That's people's money. So when Democrats underestimate why this issue is so important to voters, it's because they're looking to put food on their table to feed their own families. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. These issues matter because they're also pocketbook issues.
All right, let's talk again about something else that matters a lot to the president, especially to middle America, and that's jobs. When the president turned around and said, I'm going to do tax reform, and I'm going to answer the calling from big industry, and that is to cut the corporate tax rate and make it more competitive internationally. He thought the car companies would answer and respond affirmatively, and for the most part they have. But he still can't make sense of the closing of a GM plant right in the middle of Ohio, Lordstown, Ohio. And he says, why are you guys closing? I don't get it. They quickly said it's about the unions, UAW, and the president took on both over the weekend.
Yeah, that's right.
He tweeted this out first. Just spoke to Mary Barra, the CEO of General Motors, about the Lordstown plant where they had 1,700 employees until last week. I'm not happy that it is closed when everything else in our country is booming. I asked her to sell it or do something quickly. She blamed the UAW union. I just don't care. I just want it open.
He's definitely not holding back on that, on his opinion. And of course, General Motors coming right back in a statement saying we remain open to talking with all the affected stakeholders, but our main focus remains on our employees and offering them jobs in our plants where we have growth opportunities.
Now, keep in mind, the president is going to Ohio later this week. I'm sure he would love to be able to say, look, I talked to Mary Barra and they're going to open the plant up. What GM is doing, though, flies in the face of what Fiat, Chrysler, and Toyota are doing, and that is they're investing billions and billions of dollars in American plants and in American workers. But unfortunately, the economic realities are that particular plant just made sedans, and not many people are buying sedans right now. So rather than retrofit it and become something else, they're just going to close it down. They closed it down.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm a little torn on it because you don't really love a president getting involved in big business, but he's frustrated and he wants to put pressure.
It's jobs.
Bill Bennett weighed in last night. He sat down with Mark Levin, and this is part of what he ascertained from the president's mission.
Trump looks for fights. He starts them, but he usually has a good reason, a good cause. But boy, he's resilient. He's tough, and I admire very much what he's doing because I know he means it when he talks about American greatness and how he wants to make this country great again.
But one of the reasons he praised Toyota, which was in the face, Toyota's expanding their stamp here. You know why? A lot of what they're doing is doing with non-union workers, and it makes it easy for them to negotiate and get benefits because they can set their own course. A lot of people blame the unions for a lot of what's going on in the auto industry.
Toyota is spending $13 billion more to build more models in the United States, and Fiat Chrysler $4.5 billion to boost factory production just in the state of Michigan. One state over from Michigan is Wisconsin, and Emerson did some polling, and they found out exactly who Democratic voters are interested in. And is it one of those new faces? No. The top 2 people are people we've seen on the American scene for a very long time. Bernie Sanders has almost 40%. Joe Biden has about a quarter. As you can see right there, Elizabeth Warren 14, and then Beto O'Rourke, who had a rollout and a bad weekend, at 6, and then finally Kamala Harris in the top 5.
Yeah, that's interesting, too. Bernie Sanders beating Joe Biden. Of course, Joe Biden has not officially declared. The question is, will that shift at all? But I don't know. I feel like the Democratic voter base really wants a far-left person, be it, Bernie Sanders, be it Kamala Harris, be it, the AOC-style Democrats. And I think Joe Biden's going to have a tough road ahead if he declares.
Right now, Biden does the best against President Trump one-on-one, then goes down to everybody else who's in the margin of error, including Harris, including Klobuchar, and including Elizabeth Warren. I would say this: it is surprising that a state that had a two-term Republican governor up until the last year would be leaning socialist. I could see Biden being their choice because they prefer a Democrat, but to prefer a socialist who wants to give free everything that's never accomplished anything astounds me.
Well, something else
sounds good.
Something else
Rainbows and unicorns sound really good.
You're right. Something else astounding is Beto O'Rourke, the number has just been released, was able to raise in the first 24 hours after declaring $6.1 million. Keep in mind, when he ran for senator, lost down in Texas, he raised $80 million. And that's why there was so much excitement about Beto O'Rourke. It's kind of like, could this guy raise that much money in a presidential? Well, he's off to a good start money-wise.
He sure is. I'm curious to see how well he does. Interestingly enough, he's coming out of the gate and he's saying things like this, that he's been privileged as a white man. Take a listen.
Yeah, I would never begin by saying I'm at any disadvantage at all. As a white man who has had privileges that others could not depend on or take for granted, I've clearly had advantages over the course of my life. I think recognizing that and understanding that others have not, doing everything I can to ensure that there is opportunity and the possibility for advancement and advantage for everyone is a big part of this campaign. I'll tell you, I also happen to be the only candidate from the United States-Mexico border. There's one candidate who's there who can talk about the profoundly positive impact that immigrants have had on our safety and our security.
He also had a little problem. The fiction book he wrote where people get killed, he apologized for. He also says, I'm sorry for being involved in that hacking, this elite hacking group as
small
a team.
Scandal.
Yeah, a small scandal that they kept quiet when he was running against Ted Cruz. He also says about impeaching the president, I know I said I was for it, now I'm going to wait. And about Medicare for all, not really. I'm going to think about it. I think this was a really bumpy rollout for a guy that stood on a lot of tables and has a lot of promise, but he raised a lot of money. Bernie had 5.9. He gets 6.1. I'm very curious to see if he's going to keep apologizing for remarks he made. Just an offhand remark about his wife doing most of the raising of his kids.
Yeah.
He had to apologize for the next day.
Democratic Party establishment is going to be very worried about him. Very, very worried.
And of course, who's the leader of that? Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's
All
true.
right, 7:12 now here in New York City, and Carly joins us.
Carly.
Hey, good morning, guys. So we begin with a Fox News alert. There are multiple injuries in a shooting attack in the Netherlands. Police are investigating it as a possible terror attack. It happened at a tram station in a residential neighborhood in the Dutch city of Utrecht. People are being told to stay away from this area as trauma helicopters are being flown into the scene. And to another Fox News alert, overnight police raiding homes in Australia connected to two horrific attacks at two New Zealand mosques. The international investigation intensifying as the death toll raises to 50. New Zealand's Prime Minister taking quick action after meeting with her cabinet. She says new gun law reforms will be announced in 10 days. And the suspected killer of a notorious mob boss could be arraigned as early as today. Anthony Camello is accused of gunning down Gambino Mafia boss Frankie Cali outside a Staten Island home last week. Reports show it was likely not mob-related, but stemmed from a fight over Cali's niece. Investigators say he had no criminal history prior to this. Very interesting story there. And those are your headlines, guys.
Hey, your first killing is a mob boss?
Wow.
Wow. What's happening? All right, 13 minutes now after the hour.
A police officer dragged through the street by an ATV. The pictures police want you to see coming up.
And what does Beto O'Rourke think about our economy? He thinks it's racist. Charles Payne is here. He's walking our direction.
Good morning, Charles Payne.
7 Channel 115.
There's a lot more we got to do to make sure that this capitalism is just. The only way to meet some of these historic challenges is to be able to use this engine of capitalism. It won't be government intervention or policy alone. Now, having said that, it is clearly an imperfect, unfair, unjust, and racist capitalist economy.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Presidential hopeful Beto O'Rourke revealing how he really feels about our economy.
Charles Payne is the host of Making Money with Charles Payne on the Fox Business Network. Joins us now to react. So he first saying some good things about capitalism, then says, by the way, it's racist and unfair.
Yeah, I mean, capitalism isn't perfect because human beings aren't perfect. But it is by far the best economic system that's ever been devised in mankind. And it gets less fair and less imperfect when you add the isms, right? So when you add a racist element to it, or when you add a sexist element to it, or when you add cronyism or nepotism or elitism, that's when capitalism goes off the rails. It's not that capitalism creates those environments, it's when you bring those environments into the capitalist mix. So this is what he's getting completely wrong. And you take a look, for instance, I've been studying this for a while, and one area that's really interesting is Africa. When African nations got their independence in the late 1950s and 60s, virtually every single one embraced socialism. In part because their conquering nations were capitalists. They didn't want to go there. Russia looked very attractive at the time, the USSR. They had a powerful military, and their economy looked pretty good. Well, those countries have set themselves back 50 to 100 years. In the meantime, they also rejected democracy. They rejected pluralism. And those are the things that go hand in hand with capitalism. And that's why we have excelled so well. When I graduated from high school, 0.3% of black households made $200,000 a year. Now it's 3.1%. It's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. There's a long way to go, but you cannot argue that this is not the best system to get there.
That's just it. If you're talking about a system that promotes opportunity, I was waiting to see, and as you said, he talks about maybe, he gets very bizarre in that whole thing. Beto, at one point he talks about how maybe you need capitalism to save capitalism. I really barely ever
understand. He gets bizarre in almost everything he talks about, yeah.
But if you contrast it, if you were to contrast it with socialism, I certainly wouldn't advocate socialism as a superior system to capitalism in terms of equity or in terms of opportunity or in terms of any beneficial aspect of that nature.
Well, of course not. I mean, just like the idea that we could save the world and stop the planet from getting 1 degree warmer over the next 100 years through maybe spending trillions and trillions of dollars. Well, even that notion would be you would finance it through capitalism, right? So the transition from capitalism to socialism is going to cost a few trillion that will be generated by capitalism.
Let's see if he goes to Wall Street to ask for some money.
He will, and he'll get some.
All right.
He'll get some.
Yeah. Charles, thank you very much.
See you guys later.
Charles.
Okay.
Straight ahead, from facial recognition in China to a smart ID card in Venezuela, our next guest has sounded the alarm about new technology in the wrong hands. She's breaking down the autocrat's new toolkit next. Plus,
one basketball player dives into the sand, saving the ball, and he ends up.
Awesome race car. Thank you. All I do is win, no matter what.
glad you're up. Hope you're dressed. Kyle Busch driving us into your news by the numbers. First 200. That's how many career wins Busch now has. After yesterday's win in the Auto Club 400, it ties him with legendary driver Richard Petty for most all time. Next, number one, Zion Williamson and the Duke Blue Devils secure the top seed in the NCAA March Madness tournament. Virginia, North Carolina, Gonzaga round out the top four spots in the first round. Tip-off is tomorrow. Please pay attention. And finally, one sip. That's all it takes an NBA player to hydrate mid-game by sipping a fan's beer. 76ers forward Mike Scott taking a swig. No relation to The Office's Mike Scott after crashing into the fan while chasing a loose ball. Neither Scott nor the fan appeared hurt. Good thing it wasn't a college game because they would not have been legally allowed to drink that beer. For more on a different story, here's Jedediah and Steve.
Completely different story. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Well, the Wall Street Journal is out with a new article, and its authors are issuing a warning about the potential dangers of the next generation of technology if it gets into the wrong hands.
Does that sound familiar? Well, the autocrat's new toolkit outlines how world leaders could soon use tools of big tech to suppress and surveil their own people, and how bots will soon be indistinguishable from humans online.
Here to weigh in is co-author of the article and associate fellow at the Center for New American Security, Kara Frederick. Kara, so glad to have you here, because when I read stories like this, the immediate thought I have is people are going to say, oh, this is crazy, this is so far off. Why is this something that people should be plugged into and concerned about moving forward?
Yep, so good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning.
It's great to be here. So my co-author, Richard Fontaine, and I, we sort of surveyed the national security and technology landscape. And what really stood out to us was the fact that there's a new suite of technologies. And yes, they're in different stages of development. Some are continuing to be developed, some are emerging, some are already, at least the kernels of them, are already in place in our greater society. And what we did is we saw that this new suite of tools could really alter alter the balance between free societies and repressive regimes. So we dubbed it the Autocrat's New Toolkit. And then we identified what those technologies are and then how democracies will have to contend with their rise.
Right. You know, Kara, during the last presidential cycle, we heard about micro-targeting, how the candidates would micro-target based on what you looked up on Google and Facebook and stuff like that. But now governments, you say, are actually micro-targeting. For what?
So the main point is what these technologies do, and they're artificial intelligence driven, most of them. What they do is they allow a very small number of people to wield outsized influence. So that's when we talk about micro-targeting, we're thinking, okay, if you can automate this factor, and we know that commercial uses of micro-targeting abound right now, right?
Sure.
So they tailor content to specific users based off of the assessments of their online behavior.
Right, to help sell you stuff and things like that.
Exactly. But think of a regime that could sell you propaganda. So when these these regimes take these messaging tools and they're able to scale them, what we call in the industry, make it apparent across a broad swath of the population by automating it, and then make it very precise. So increase the efficiency of this potential propaganda messaging that's dictated by regimes. I mean, think of what that means across how many people that could hit across populations.
Now, countries like China, Venezuela are already utilizing some of this facial recognition technology. And I think some people think about, in the United States, companies like Facebook, for example, who micro-target for advertising. And to them, they're starting to see this as a new normal and say it's benign. But if that were implemented by a government, you could spread massive propaganda, you could micro-target citizens, you could penalize certain citizens over others. Do you see this as something that could realistically be playing out in terms of government taking authority in these positions in the near future in the United States?
So the United States, I mean, as long as we maintain a free and open society and really contest the use by repressive regimes, I think we are going to be at a better standpoint than most other countries. So if you look at what's happening in China right now, we're sort of citing them as, you know, the main regime that's very, very eager to export these technologies to other like-minded countries, which are more closed societies that don't really have the mechanisms to kind of fight back against this. They don't have the mechanisms to introduce countermeasures to really harden their own systems against external intrusions. So it's very important that we maintain our principles as an open society, and that will make democracy stronger to contend against the malicious uses of these technologies.
Well, it certainly is something to think about, what's going on around the world. Kara Frederick, we thank you very much for joining us on this Monday morning. Thank you.
We have a Fox News alert for you. A possible terror attack overseas. An update is minutes away.
Plus, a woman comes inches away from being hit by a collapsing wall. The shocking moments caught on camera.
And Bernie Sanders says his socialist ideas aren't that crazy anymore.
Guaranteeing health care to all is a right, not a privilege. Oh, they said too radical, too radical.
Oh, what do the voters think about that? The brand new deal. The police is sworn in as a junior officer on his 5th birthday.
Look at that right there, Santa Ana. Police caught word that little Ewan wants to be an officer when he grows up, so they stopped by his birthday bash, and what do? They swore him in.
Nice. The boys in blue also bringing some soccer balls as presents. Always a good idea.
Now, I would imagine this was just ceremonial. I don't know that he's an actual police officer.
He's a hero in the making.
There you go.
I don't know, is there a shift after school? Is there an after-school cop shift?
There's an after-school special.
I know that.
That's over on CBS.
So last week I had a chance, I think on Thursday, to go to interview the Secretary of State, and at which time we went a little long. We were supposed to have a more extensive walkthrough, but he says, hey, let's go. Let me just show you a few of the paintings on this floor at the State Department, which was privately financed and redone in the 1980s. So here's a look at my walk-around with the Secretary of State.
Where am I now? So you're in the treaty room, headed to the center, and it's got this beautiful artwork, space that was restored with private funds. You got Secretary Rice, a lot of history here, Secretary Powell. Secretary Schultz, who did fantastic work back in the 1980s for President Reagan.
And still going strong at almost 100.
It's quite a story. I hope I make it that long, too.
Have you had a chance to take an exhale and think to yourself, I'm going to be on this wall one day?
I have, and it's humbling.
You have James Madison over there. Yeah. And the more you read about him, the more you understand what a genius he was.
Yeah.
Let alone as president, what he did.
Yeah, the work that Federalist Papers had, it's all amazing stuff these folks did.
Right.
And the media environment was very different, too.
Right. But they were hostile.
We've always had a robust First Amendment and freedom of the press, and we've all been beneficiaries of that.
I can tell you're a diplomat. You're a diplomat these days. Robust. That's a good word. And you got Jefferson. I think he was somewhat accomplished. Secretary of State, Vice President, President.
Yeah.
With West Point and Harvard, I know they slipped in some history. And of course, in West Point, it is a living, breathing history. What do you think of this former Secretary of State turned Vice President?
I tell you what, it's pretty remarkable. You think back to these times, I was reminded that he had a staff of about 7 or 8. And I had my team come and say, I wonder what that government shutdown looked like when you have 7 people.
Right.
Amazing leader, incredibly creative, smart, and left a legacy that we're all still benefiting from.
Oh, look at that.
So, yeah, it's up to every Secretary of State. They get their painting. They're remarkably accurate, but they have not done Hillary Clinton. They have not done Tillerson, because I guess you needed to take a quick, you had to be a little quicker. He was in and out really quick. Yeah. And then I guess Mike Pompeo to be all caught up.
Why haven't they done Hillary Clinton yet?
I don't know.
Because
I don't know.
Her portrait is in the White House, actually.
They know.
As First Lady.
They know as First Lady. They wanted a different type of portrait in the White House.
Good job.
Pretty amazing. Good job, Brian.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
All right. Meanwhile, 24 minutes before the top of the hour, Carly Shimkus is in today for Jillian.
Right. Yes, and I have some headlines for you. Get a load of this story. A North Carolina man accused of murdering his wife is arrested in Arizona, 34 miles away from the Mexican border. Police say Rexford Lynn Neal had a large amount of cash on him when he was stopped near Tucson. His wife Diane's body was found along a road near their home earlier this month. This case has prompted police to look back into the death of Neal's first wife, originally ruled an accident. A new warning for parents about so-called virtual kidnappings. California police are investigating after scammers called parents claiming their daughters were abducted. They demanded money be transferred into a Mexican bank account to get their children back. In both cases, the ransom was paid before the parents found out their kids were safe the entire time. Immigration activists in Sacramento roll out 2 new publications to teach undocumented immigrants how to deal with ICE.
I want the community to actually make sure that Americans feel safe, whether you're a citizen or a non-citizen.
One of the publications is a comic book to teach kids how to protect their parents who are here illegally, how to deal with law enforcement. And a YouTube tech blogger uses his wife as a guinea pig to test Tesla's autopilot and nearly, get this, runs her over.
Now, we're gonna test autopilot. Okay, it brakes.
Yeah, she kind of had to pick up the pace towards the end there, his brave wife standing in the road as he drives at her going up to 35 miles per hour. The man fending off criticism, saying his wife was never at risk. But I'm sure he is in the doghouse.
Oh, yeah.
Those guys are your
Carl,
help.
the thing is, the president's saying over the weekend, the stories come out, he is not for the either am I, by the way.
Neither am
He's
I.
not for the self-driving cars. He does not believe in him. He's telling the Tesla guy, I'm not into it. Don't tell me about your advances. People want to drive.
Yes.
I've got one of those cars that is semi-autonomous. You can put it in and it keeps you between the stripes.
Yeah. No.
It's a little scary.
No. Too scary. And plus, we don't need the takeover of the machines, people.
No. Meanwhile, Janice Dean is out in the streets where people are
look at this.
In attendance, a big crowd.
Wow.
It's
Incredible.
like Christmas
6:30
season.
in the morning. Are you guys in the right address? Yes? All right. You're excited to be on Fox and Friends. Do I have a birthday? Get over here, birthday boy. What's your name?
Michael.
And where are you from?
Houston, Texas.
Welcome. I've got a birthday over here, too. Hello, lady. What's your name?
I'm Hannah.
And where are you from?
St. Louis.
Very nice. Celebrating with Fox and Friends. Hello, East Gators from Texas. Rita and Ed, I love it. Let's take a look at the maps. I love it when we have this many people up with me at 6:30. It's 33 here in New York, but you know what? We're going to see a warm-up later this week. Big news this week across the Midwest where we have incredible flooding over Nebraska and Iowa. I know you guys have been following this story. Flash flood warnings in effect, and all of this flooding is going to go downstream downstream into parts of the Missouri River Valley and then the Mississippi River Valley. It's going to be a story we're going to be covering for many weeks. Record levels across portions of Nebraska. Future radar shows a little system moving into the region. We're not going to see a lot of heavy rain, but any more rainfall is not good news. The rest of the country looks pretty good. It's going to be 47 in New York. All right, wave to Steve and Jedediah and Brian.
Thanks, everybody.
Yay!
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, JD.
Thanks.
All right.
Well, you thought an aspirin a day could keep a heart attack away?
Right.
You got to think again.
What?
The brand new guidelines are out this morning.
Plus, some 2020 Democrats are pushing socialist policies, but our next guest says there are just 9 steps from freedom to socialism. What are they? Stay tuned.
Good morning. Some quick headlines to get to. Health organizations no longer recommending daily low-dose aspirin to prevent heart attacks. A new report saying the benefits for older, healthy Americans aren't worth the risk of internal bleeding. The pain reliever can still be a lifesaver for those with past heart issues, however. And listen to this. The creator of the Jelly Belly jelly bean is going to pot. David Klein launching a line of jelly beans infused with CBD, a marijuana extract. The 38 flavors include toasted marshmallow, strawberry cheesecake, cinnamon, and spicy licorice. Klein says he's convinced his CBD jelly beans will, quote, help the world. That is a lofty goal. Steve?
Okay. Thanks, Carly, for that update. Meanwhile, it's a race to the left for Democrats heading into 2020 as more on the left are embracing socialistic policies.
Our next guest now sounding the alarm, writing in a new op-ed, there are just 9 steps from freedom to socialism to societal breakdown.
That writer is former chairman of the California Republican Party, Tom Del Arcaro, is joining us right now from San Francisco. Tom, good morning to you.
Hey,
Morning,
thanks
Tom.
for having me on.
Okay,
How are you?
Doing okay. We're going to go through the 9 points, and we're going to see how close we're getting to it. First of all, the first step is government spending, and we do a lot of that. And it's massive.
Yeah, we do have massive. We're going to spend $7.6 trillion as a society in this upcoming year, which is roughly 4 times what Reagan's era spent when he said government was the problem.
All right, number 2 are tax systems that reduce incentives.
Yeah, we have massive tax systems, and the hallmarks of socialist societies are poor incentives where there's weak economic growth, and that comes from tax systems. Trump did a good job beginning with the business tax code. He's got to do better with personal so we have better growth.
Next step, number 3, reduced growth leading to economic stagnation, and that's something the EU's seen over the last 20 years.
Yeah, they've had 0 economic growth over the last 20 years, and government is about 60, 70% of their economies. In the United States, we're about 36, with regulations closer to 50. Our growth has slipped from 4 to 2 over the last 60 years. Trump's trying to revive it.
Next up, something that gives me rage, are growing deficits.
Yeah, this is what happens when you have massive government spending. There's no example in history of a big government that didn't have deficits and lots of taxes. And the United States is pushing the limit here. Greece was at 180% of the economy. We're at 106.
Okay,
in debt.
Next step, number 5, governments print money. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, no government can keep up with the spending. Taxes can't do enough, so they start printing money. This is the danger zone when that sort of thing happens. We had it once in the 70s. Venezuela has it now. They have, what, 1,000,000% inflation this year. 1 million.
Number 6, wage and price control.
Yeah, this all comes out of weak economic growth. That's the key here. If you have 0 or less growth, you're going to have stagnation. And then you start having shortages, all these problems. We had it a little bit in the 70s. In Venezuela, the stores can only be open on certain days, and you can only shop on certain days.
That's crazy. Underground economies rise. That's happening in certain spots.
Yeah, in the United States, we had a lot of this during the Carter era, but once the engine got going under Reagan, then it changed. So in Greece, it's about 25%. Here in America, it's 5 to 6%. That's a good and normal amount.
Number 8 is a big one, class warfare, which we're already seeing right now, frankly.
Yeah, and that all relates to economic growth. If people can get jobs, then they start to worry about what's on their own plate and advancing. But if they can't get jobs, they look to the others and say, well, they're doing too well. And if you have too much income gap or wealth gap, then it gets played up. That's where the real danger zone starts.
And the final step is total societal discord, which is what we're seeing right now in Venezuela. But Tom, let me ask you about this. How, in this country, you know, as you look at some of those steps towards socialism, some of them seem like we're right there. But others were a bit apart. Are we closer to this than we were 20 years ago?
We are, because spending is so much more. And if they went forward with something like Medicare for All and drove spending above 50%, then socialism starts to sound normal and comes into view. If we kill off economic growth with AOC's Green New Deal, then you're going to have this class warfare. This can be avoided. Sweden's walking away from socialism, down from 70% spending to 50%. We can walk away from this, but it would be really dumb, if we did the Green New Deal or Medicare for All, because that would drive spending so high we'd have economic stagnation and back to this class warfare.
Thanks, Tom. It's funny, when I was looking at this, I was thinking about the Democratic Party platform, and I don't think their platform is going to do too well when people start realizing what the consequences of these things are. But thank you so much for your input.
Yes, definitely. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom.
Counselor to the President, Kellyanne Conway, is going to join us live coming up.
Yep. Plus, the left is praising a teenager who egged an Australian senator after his comments about the New Zealand shooting. But don't try that egg thing with Joey Jones. Uh-oh. He'll tell you why, coming up next.
An Australian senator facing backlash after he took on a 17-year-old who threw an egg on his head. The Prime Minister of Australia suggesting he could face charges for fighting back. But our next guest has a message for anyone who attacks him.
Retired U.S. Marine Corps bomb technician Joey Jones joins us now. Joey, you watched this. Do you think who do you back in this scenario? Was it right for the kid to hit him with an egg? Was it right for the response?
Well, I don't back stupidity, but I understand someone's nature to defend themselves. Let me make this clear. I'm not defending this senator's comments at all. But if you walk up to someone and attack them from behind and don't expect retaliation, you're pretty stupid. Perhaps, you know, at 17 he doesn't know this. Maybe at 18 or 20 he will. Maybe that's why we don't let 17-year-olds vote in this country. His discretion or discernment just isn't there yet. But, you know, as someone that's been trained in hand-to-hand combat, I can tell you, if I get attacked from behind, the first thing I'm going to do is react. Before I realize if that was an egg or a hammer or what it was. Right. You can see in the video, he takes a moment, a split second, and it looks like he decides to slap him instead of punch him. And I do applaud the senator on that notion. Then the 17-year-old retaliates, and then he comes back with his fist swinging. I think the people around the senator did the right thing by separating them and neutralizing the kid.
Well, you know, violence is never the answer. You hear that a lot, but this seems to have been something that was set up for social media. It looked like there were all those cameras around. Yeah.
Well, and you know, the idea that violence is never the answer, violence is never the remedy you initiate. But when someone attacks you, you defend yourself. In this country, we have the right to self-defense in most states. I don't know exactly what Australia's laws are. I'm sure the senator, obviously being the older person and the person who retaliated, it's kind of like on the football field. You only see the person that punches back, I guess. I'm not sure why people are deciding that this 17-year-old kid is a victim. He initiated the contact. Another point I'll point out is that, you know, Westboro Baptist Church protested vehemently against my brother being buried at Arlington. And had they so much as blown bubbles at us, something would have happened. We would have defended ourselves. No matter why you're protesting, right or wrong, I'm not saying the 17-year-old is on the same level as Westboro Baptist Church, but protesting is only protected so long as you don't physically harm someone. And the moment you do or attempt to, then that person has the right to defend themselves. So this is just a really stupid move by a young kid.
You know, Joey, and I agree with you. I didn't like what the senator's remarks on immigration either, but this kid has actually been glorified on Twitter. He's been called Egg Boy. I mean, you have people reaching out and saying, how can we pay for his legal fees? How can we get him to get more eggs? And there's a new trend now where this seems to be acceptable behavior. Crack somebody in the head with an egg if you disagree with them. If people on your side disagree with your policies, or maybe they didn't like what the guy said, that becomes okay. So are you concerned about normalizing violence in protests and somehow elevating people who commit acts of violence against people you disagree with?
Well, they say 1% of America serves. About 20 million veterans, that's larger. It's about 10% of America has served. But let me tell you something. As someone in an elite fraternity who has had to defend myself and my life, I can tell you that regardless if it's our president, if it's our senators, our representatives, or our local mayors, our elected representatives have to understand that every word they say in today's world will be held against them, and people can get to them. So I think that this is an omen, or at least a cautionary tale for everyone, that spouting off at the mouth before you think, or throwing an egg at someone before you think, can result in something much worse than a bad tweet or public shaming. We have to understand that most people in this world are going to defend themselves when attacked. And you don't have the opportunity to decide, oh, that was an egg, and this is a 17-year-old.
The kid was just waiting for the response, so he knew something was coming at him. That's what he was hoping for. Joey, thanks.
And we don't know what his stance is. We don't know what he's trying to say back. All he did was throw an egg. He didn't make a point. Nobody learned from it.
Joey, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
More.